ភាសាខ្មែរនឹងមានផ្សាយបន្តផ្ទាល់តាមមេក្រូក្នុងសាលសាធារណៈ
The Khmer language will be broadcast on the public gallery speaker system. L'audience sera diffusée en Khmer par les haut-parleurs de la galerie du public.
សូមពាក់ឧបករណ៍ស្ដាប់សំឡេងដើម្បីស្ដាប់ភាសាខ្មែរអង់គ្លេសនិងបារាំងលេខ 1 ជាភាសាខ្មែរលេខ 2 ជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសលេខ 3 ជាភាសាបារាំង
Use the headsets provided to follow the proceedings in Khmer, English, or French. Channel 1 is Khmer channel. Channel 2 is English channel. Channel 3 is French channel. Vous pouvez utiliser les écouteurs qui vous ont été remis pour suivre les débats en Khmer, anglais ou français. Vous recevez le Khmer sur le canal 1. Vous recevez l'anglais sur le canal 2. Vous recevez le français sur le canal 3.
មិនអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យយកឧបករណ៍ស្ដាប់សំឡេងចេញក្រៅសាលសាធារណៈ
សូមអញ្ជើញអង្គុយចុះ
The trial chamber declares the resumption of the hearing. The greffiers, have you already verified the list of parties and participants in the proceedings so that it can be recorded in the transcript? I would like to ask the detention facility officials to bring the accused to the dock. You may sit down. Next, the chamber would like to inform the co-prosecutors that the co-prosecutors now could make a brief opening statement of the charges against the accused 9 bis 2 if the co-prosecutors wish to do so. The trial chamber would limit 2 hours for that. You now take the floor.
Your Honors, we, the co-prosecutors of the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, would like to make a brief opening statement of charges against Duch, the head of the S21 office, having seen the criminal case filed number 002, dated 14 August 2006, Noting and reviewing case file number 001, dated 18th July 2007, of the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges, which initiated on the 18th of July 2007 by such office, having considered Article 1 of the Law on the Establishment of the Extraordinary Chambers in the Court of Cambodia, having considered Rule 66.5 of the ECCC Internal Rules, and the conclusion of the judicial investigation, noting the case file forwarded to the Office of the Co-Prosecutors dated 23 June 2008, find the following facts. For 30 years, 1.5 million victims of the Khmer Rouge have been demanding justice for their suffering. For 30 years, the survivors of democratic Cambodia have been waiting for accountability. For 30 years, a whole generation of Cambodians have been struggling to get answers about their family's fate. While today, in this courtroom, before the Cambodian people and the world, at long last, this process begins, and justice will be done. The government of Cambodia itself, struggling with the Khmer Rouge legacy, and the international community that for so long failed the people of Cambodia, have finally recognized that justice must prevail and that there cannot be impunity for the worst of crimes, even after 30 years. Circumstances have dictated that this process must start with the trial of this accused. Your Honor, you are called upon to decide the guilt or innocence of one man, and only for the crimes with which he is charged. He must not be judged for the crimes of others, nor for his beliefs or membership in a group, but for the victimization of others on a massive scale for which he is legally responsible. But lest we forget, Your Honors, you are also called upon to determine before all how and why this man was allowed to commit those crimes. You will need to do this because the law calls for it, but also because history demands it. Beyond this one case and beyond the day-to-day business of this one trial, throughout we must never forget that it is the purpose of courts such as this one to establish the truth unflinchingly, without fear, restrictions, or prejudice, so that humankind may learn and history not be repeated. In this search for the truth, we, the co-prosecutors, will assist the trial chamber to the best of our abilities, whilst mindful of our responsibility to prove the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt. We submit that the evidence of this case, some of which we will now highlight for you, will indeed satisfy that burden on all counts. We wish to draw your attention and expand upon some of the evidence gathered in the case file. Not to repeat the facts as laid out in the closing order, but rather to underline some of the evidence and the links and conclusions can be drawn from that evidence. We will therefore examine the context in which the crimes at S21 occurred. We will then speak to the role of the accused, responsibility for the commission of those crimes before concluding on some of the legal aspects relevant to that responsibility. Obviously, what we are about to state are simply arguments. And your judgment will validate those arguments or not. Furthermore, you, the Chamber, will determine if the facts are indeed supported by the evidence and determine what if any of that evidence will be taken into account. S21 formed an integral and indeed a vital part of a widespread and systematic attack on the entire population of Cambodia. This attack was the implementation of a plan that the CPK's leadership agreed to and started implementing much before the inception of S21. As a subordinate of this leadership, acting on their orders and in furtherance of those policies, the accused crimes were part of this attack. Your Honours, the Communist Party of Cambodia was born on 30 September 1960 in the Phnom Penh railway station, elected Nuon Chea as Deputy Secretary of the party, and made Pol Pot and Ieng Sary a member of the Central Committee of the party. In 1963, Salot Saw, alias Pol Pot, became Secretary of the party. Soon, to the Cambodian people and the world, they would be known as the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge's immediate objective was to foment a political movement to combat feudalism and imperialism in order to build up the strength to later launch an armed struggle to overthrow the Sihanouk regime and drive Western influence out of the country. Their ultimate goal was the establishment of a pure communist society, unlike any seen before. Although the Stalinist, Chinese, and Vietnamese models did influence the Khmer Communists. The Communist rebellion grew slowly, but the Republican coup d'etat against Prince Sihanouk in 1970 changed everything. Responding to the former king's calls to rise up against Lon Nol, people all over the country joined the revolution. Almost overnight, Khmer Rouge forces grew from a few thousands to tens of thousands. The USA's expanded aerial bombing also helped drive disillusioned peasants into the arms of the Khmer Rouge revolution. Gradually expanding the areas it controlled, the Khmer Rouge, in the guise of a coalition of opposition forces, finally entered Phnom Penh on 17 April 1975. The nightmare of the Cambodian people was about to begin. Some then, and perhaps still now, argue that the Khmer Rouge came to power with the best of intentions and that something went terribly wrong. But that is simply not true. From the very beginning, as evidenced by its policies in the zones, it controlled before April 1975, the Khmer Rouge leadership was intent on ridding itself of its perceived enemies and placed little value in human rights or life itself. As one of its infamous slogans so chillingly foretold, to kill you is no gain, to destroy you is no loss. Even today, despite over 30 years of study, it is still hard to grasp the extent of the fundamental changes undertaken by the Khmer Rouge and the ruthlessness and efficiency with which it carried out its utopian social engineering experiment. Once the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia, they instituted a regimented political hierarchy that broke the country into sections and various subsections. The following DK-era map shows the political hierarchy of democratic Cambodia. The 6 zones seen here were the largest and most powerful sections. The zones were then subdivided into sectors, which were further subdivided into districts. Districts were composed of several communes or sub-districts. Here is the DK political map. It is zoned, which reported to the Standing Committee of the CPK. An independent or autonomous region is painted in different colors. Example, this is the Southwest Zone, identified by its DK-era code. This is the Region 13, which reported to Southwest Zone leadership. From this strict dividing of Cambodia into hierarchical areas, the CPK was able to implement its criminal policies by disseminating orders down through the hierarchy. This structure also allowed the CPK Central Committee
Mr. President, I apologize, can we suspend 1 second? We appear to have a technical problem. We want to present to you and to everybody else apparently some slides that are not showing up on everybody's monitor. So might as well get that out of the way right now. So if we could suspend maybe 5 minutes while we are trying to assemble.
Okay.
the President. Yes, I agree. Please, the IT, can you resolve the problem for the co-prosecutors?
I just want to assure that it worked well when we tried it out before, but now, of course, it doesn't.
President, may the co-prosecutor continue. The co-prosecutor, Your Honors, do you see the images on the screen? The President, please, the co-prosecutor, continue your statement. The co-prosecutor, Your Honors, would you please allow for me to continue from the first picture? Once the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia, they instituted a regimented political hierarchy that broke the country into sections and various subsections. The following DK era map shows the political hierarchy of democratic Cambodia. The 6 zones seen here were the largest and most powerful sections. The zones were then subdivided into sectors, which were further subdivided into districts. Districts were composed of several communes or sub-districts. This is a diagram of the democratic Cambodia structures. And here is the zone which reported to the standing committees of the CPK. An independent or autonomous region is painted in different colors. Example, this is the southwest zone, identified by its DK era code. This is the region 13, which reported to southwest zone leadership. From this strict dividing of Cambodia into hierarchical areas, the CPK was able to implement its criminal policies by disseminating orders down through the hierarchy. This structure also allowed the CPK Central Committee to control the progress of policy implementations as reported by various sections. By discouraging formal horizontal ties or communications, the CPK also prevented alliances that might have jeopardized its control or diminished the efficient implementation of its policies. Ultimately, through that state, party and armed forces apparatuses, a large part of Cambodia's population was to be subjected to policies of forced movement, forced labor, illegal arrest, detention, inhumane living conditions, torture, and executions. Millions. This is a brief forced movement video. Millions of Cambodians were forcibly moved from one part of the country to another. The first forced evacuation within this court's temporal jurisdiction began on 17 April 1975, when the CPK forcibly evacuated Phnom Penh. The following clip shows how literally overnight Phnom Penh's 2 million inhabitants were driven out of their homes and forcibly marched into the countryside with little but what they could carry on their backs. Anyone who hesitated was executed. Because the Khmer Rouge made no provisions to feed or shelter the evacuees, literally hundreds of thousands died from exposure, starvation, exhaustion, and disease. These images of a ghost town remained a powerful testament to the determination, efficiency, and ruthlessness of the Khmer Rouge in implementing their policies. A second wave of forced movements occurred in late 1975 through early 1976 that resulted in hundreds of thousands of people being forcibly moved from central and southwestern Cambodia to the northwest zone. Another large-scale forced movement occurred in mid-1978 when tens of thousands of people were forcibly removed from the East Zone. Following the takeover of Cambodia by the CPK, virtually all of Cambodia's population was unlawfully confined to rural cooperatives or government worksites. In cooperatives, the population was forced to labor under inhumane conditions. People were forced to endure long hours of physical labor, terrible working conditions, insufficient food, and inadequate medical care. The forced labor video of the decade. These conditions also existed at government worksites, where tens of thousands of people were forced to work on massive construction projects involving dams, reservoirs, airports, and other public works. Eschewing modern tools and planning, and substituting political orthodoxy for competency, the CPK leadership let thousands of forced laborers die of starvation, overwork, and execution. This clip shows examples of these massive work projects. Here, the projects were dam building and rice farming. To ensure the success of its revolution, the CPK sought to eradicate all those it considered enemies. Beginning on their first day in power, the CPK targeted the political leadership of the Lon Nol regime and the officer corps, many of whom were executed during the forcible evacuation of Phnom Penh. The rank and file soldiers and civil servants, though not initially prioritized for execution, were targeted in later waves of killings beginning in 1976. The CPK also pursued an explicit policy of eliminating members of economic classes that were considered beyond redemption: the landowner, the shopkeeper, the merchant, the educated, and all those tainted by association with those classes. All of the people expelled from the cities were classified as new people and defined as potential enemies. Huge numbers of these new people were killed because of their perceived disloyalty. Other groups singled out for mistreatment and killings included ethnic Vietnamese, Chams, overseas Cambodians intellectuals lured into returning, Khmer Campuchia Kraum, Buddhists, and many others. The backbone of this persecution was a nationwide network of security centers which were created throughout Cambodia. Mirroring the political hierarchy, security centers were created in every subdivision and from one end of the country to the other. From the communal prison at the base of the pyramid to S21 at its apex, these centers had but one purpose: to rid the regime of its perceived enemies. Most prisoners were sent to the local commune or perhaps district security office, where they were systematically starved, endured inhumane detention conditions and forced labor, tortured to confess their crimes and accomplices, and killed. However, if their crime was deemed to have serious political or security implications. There was a strong possibility that they were reported and moved up the chain of security centers. Eventually, certain prisoners would end up at S21, the end of the line for anyone unfortunate enough to reach it. Zone, sector, and district security offices also received orders from the upper level to arrest and deliver individuals who had been implicated as enemies in confessions of the tortured prisoners of S21. Once detained there, these new prisoners would in turn be tortured until they confessed to being enemies, implicating their friends, colleagues, and neighbors, creating a new list of traitors to be arrested, tortured, and smashed. It was a vicious cycle, and the number of victims only grew larger with time. The DK mass grave site map. This slide is an overlay over a DK era map of the results from a documentation center of Cambodia mass grave site mapping project. It shows about 380 mass grave sites spread throughout the country. Linked to those mass graves are approximately 195 security centers which would use these sites to dispose of their victims. During this trial, your honors will meet a man who is living proof of the strict hierarchy of the DK prison system. Since all the identities of the witnesses are protected for the moment, we will call him by his pseudonym KWO1. He was arrested at a rural cooperative in the province and first detained in chains at the cooperative security office. Then he was transferred to a district security office and from there to the zone security office where he was repeatedly tortured. Finally, he was sent to S21, the top of the hierarchical network of DK security offices, where he came face to face with the accused. He represents one of the lucky few of those detained at security centers who did not end up in one of these mass graves. Your honors, although Dutch is not being charged with any crimes that occurred outside of S21, S24 and Chiang 8, the evidence will show that his crimes were part of a widespread and systematic attack on Cambodia's population. Such attack led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children through inhumane living conditions, forced labor, starvation, and execution. By his knowledge of this attack and his intent to further it through the commission of the crimes for which he is charged, Dutch, as head of S21, played a key role in its implementation. Notably, the CPK's attack on their own population was not only conflict occurring during this period. At the same time, Cambodia and Vietnam were engaged in an armed conflict along their border. The fighting was intensive and prolonged throughout the existence of democratic Cambodia. This conflict is relevant to this trial because Dutch is charged with grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions arising out of the torture, inhumane treatment, and willful killing of Vietnamese prisoners of war and civilians who were sent to S-21. Under the Geneva Conventions, the parties to an armed conflict are entitled to certain protections. At S-21, these protections were denied, and as such, the killings of Vietnamese soldiers and civilians at S-21, in addition to constituting crimes against humanity, amounted to grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions. Instead of providing protection to these men and women, as required by the conventions, Dutch supervised their detention, torture, and execution. The evidence in the case filed demonstrates that an international armed conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam began in April 1975 and increased in scope and intensity throughout the decade period. Eventually, a massive invasion of Cambodia by Vietnamese forces in December 1978 resulted in the overthrow of the CPK in January 1979. Dutch was aware of this that the Vietnamese soldiers and civilians he was receiving were captured in relation to this armed conflict. Armed conflict video. Combat between DK and Vietnamese troops occurred along the border with Vietnam and on islands near the coast of Cambodia during 1975 and into 1976. The following footage shows an example of these border battles. This footage shows Khmer Rouge soldiers in combat with Vietnamese forces. These clashes steadily escalated